In the summer of 2006, a thunderstorm tore through a rural Texas campground. And when the storm cleared, 7 children were gone. No bodies, no witnesses, just a single scorched log and a silence that lasted for decades. But now, 19 years later, the only known survivor remembers something she was never meant to, a symbol burned into her skin, and a name whispered in the lightning. This is the story of what happened that night, at the fire circle. If you're drawn to true crime stories that unravel long-buried secrets and expose the darkness hidden in everyday places, hit subscribe. August 12, 2006. Location: Camp Ashwood, Trinity County, Texas. It was supposed to be the last perfect night of summer. The fire crackled in the circle pit, its glow flickering across 14 young faces gathered beneath the canopy of Texas pine. The wind whispered through the trees. A counselor, mid-30s and grinning, leaned forward on his log seat, flashlight under his chin. "Legend says," he said in a theatrical hush, "that in these very woods, a boy once wandered off alone during a thunderstorm and was never seen again." A few kids giggled. Some rolled their eyes. Others clutched their knees tighter, eyes darting to the looming black between the trees. At the back of the circle, 12-year-old Marley Greer wrapped her damp hoodie around her knees. She wasn't afraid of ghost stories, but she was afraid of the sky. Storms brought migraines, and worse, memories she couldn't place. Her palms itched. Her mouth was dry, and above them, clouds boiled over the pines like smoke. Then came the thunder, a deep, rolling growl that shook the wooden benches beneath them. Several campers jumped. One of the counselors reached for a flashlight clipped to his belt. "It's just thunder," he said lightly. "Let's wrap this up before the rain gets here." But it was already too late. Lightning sliced through the sky like a white-hot blade. The fire snapped, scattering embers into the air like dying stars. And then came the scream. Not a child, not an animal, something older, something hollow. The counselors shouted over the wind. "Back to cabins, now, let's go!" Campers scattered. Shouts echoed through the clearing. The fire hissed under sudden rain. In the chaos, 7 children never made it back. August 13th, 2006. Location: Camp Ashwood, Trinity County, Texas. The sun rose quietly over Camp Ashwood, turning the pine trees gold and the damp soil silver with dew. Birds chirped like nothing had happened. A thin mist curled along the forest floor, veiling the sleeping bags left out to dry, the forgotten flashlights, the overturned bench by the fire pit. And then the screaming began. It came not from a child, but from Tanya Mitchell, the junior counselor assigned to Cabin 3. Her voice sliced through the stillness like glass. "They're gone!" she shrieked, tripping down the gravel path in soaked sneakers, her Camp Ashwood hoodie clinging to her thin frame. "They're gone!" Up at the main lodge, Aaron Chandler, the 28-year-old camp director, looked up from his clipboard. He'd already been trying to figure out why 4 cabins hadn't shown up for breakfast roll call. Most kids were just slow on rainy mornings, especially after a fire circle. But something about the way Tanya screamed made his stomach drop. He jogged toward her. "What do you mean gone?" Tanya's eyes were wild. "Cabin 3!" she gasped, barely able to breathe. 7 kids. I counted. I checked twice. I thought maybe they were in the showers or in the mess, but..." She shook her head. "Their bunks are still made. Their clothes are still there. They never came back last night." A heavy silence fell between them. Aaron turned to the other counselors gathering outside the lodge. "Everyone, check your cabins. Now I want a full head count. Staff too." Within 30 minutes, panic had replaced morning routine. By 9 a.m., the Trinity County Sheriff's Department had arrived with 3 marked cruisers and a bloodhound named Maple. The other campers were kept inside the mess hall under supervision, watching The Incredibles on a mounted TV, their laughter fading as one by one they realized something was wrong. Very wrong. Deputy Silas Reed, in his mid-40s with a permanent sunburn on his neck, stood with Aaron and the senior counselors near the fire pit, where the final ghost story had ended. "This is where they were last seen?" he asked. Aaron nodded. It was storming, so the counselors called lights out early. Everyone scattered. We thought they went back to their cabins. Reed looked down at the charred remains of the fire. One log was darker than the rest, blackened through the core. It hadn't just burned, it had split from the heat. He walked the perimeter. No broken branches, no drag marks, no footprints, not even in the soft mud from last night's storm. It was like they had evaporated. "Names," Reed said. "I need names." Aaron handed him the emergency binder. The missing campers were Daniel Danny Cordell, age 11, Kayla Tran, age 9, Mason Weiler, age 12, Thomas and Lucia Ortega. Twin siblings, age 10, Brooklyn Hines, age 8, Noah Meeks, age 11, from different cabins, different towns. No common thread except that they'd all been at the fire circle, and the only one who might have seen anything was Marley Greer. Marley sat on the nurse's cot, shivering in a blanket despite the summer heat. Her fingertips were wrinkled, her sneakers were damp, and across her collarbone, just beneath the edge of her shirt, was a strange, light pink welt, almost like a burn. No one had noticed it until she winced when the nurse adjusted her collar. "Do you remember anything after the fire circle?" Deputy Reed asked gently. She looked past him, eyes unfocused. "There was lightning." "Anything else?" Her brow furrowed. I heard someone calling me. A voice. But it wasn't anyone I knew. Did you see anyone leave the fire circle?" "I don't know. Everyone was screaming. I tripped. When I got back to my cabin, I thought I was the last one." She trailed off. The nurse gently touched her wrist. "You're safe now, Marley." Marley didn't answer. Her hand went to her collarbone again. By noon, the search party numbered over 50. Campgrounds, trails, the river, even the highway. No sign of the 7 children. The dogs picked up a scent near the fire pit, then lost it completely, as if it vanished into thin air. No blood, no torn fabric, no signs of struggle. The rain had come down hard, sure, but still, it was too clean. When the FBI arrived 36 hours later, the entire camp was closed. Parents were called. News vans set up near the entrance. For a few weeks, Camp Ashwood was all anyone talked about. Then, gradually, the headlines faded. No suspects, no leads, no children. Just 7 names added to the growing list of the missing. And Marley Greer, the last one to see them alive, who woke every night after that screaming about fire. About a symbol she could never draw the same way twice. About something she called the Whisperer in the Woods. August 15th, 2006. Location: Trinity County Sheriff's Office, Texas. The chairs in the waiting room were too small for grief, too plastic, too clean. Rafael Ortega sat hunched forward, elbows on knees, fists clenched so tight his knuckles were bloodless. Beside him, Marta Ortega gripped her purse in both hands, the leather strap twisted nearly to the point of tearing. Across from them, Sheriff Kenneth Wolfe, a tall man with storm-colored eyes and 3 decades of law enforcement behind him, rubbed his temple and stared at the report in his lap like it might rearrange itself into something useful. "Mr. and Mrs. Ortega," he said gently, "I know you want answers. We all do. But right now, we don't have enough information to—" "You don't lose 2 children." Marta's voice cracked, rising like a snap of brittle wood. "You don't misplace twins. They were under your protection." Wolfe didn't flinch. He'd faced furious parents before. But this was different. 7 missing, no trace, and no leads. "We're treating this as a suspected abduction," he said carefully. "There were no signs of a struggle, but the circumstances, they're not normal. FBI is still coordinating with missing persons and national databases. I promise, we are not giving up. Don't promise me." Raphael's voice was low and tight. "Bring them home." Wolf looked down at the paper again. The names were starting to blur. He needed something. Anything. Down the hall, Detective Mason O'Connell stood at the window in interview room B, arms crossed, staring through the one-way glass at the girl on the other side. Marley Greer sat at the table, still wearing the same camp hoodie from the night of the storm. She was silent. Her hair hung limp over her face, and her fingers moved constantly, not fidgeting but drawing, over and over again, on a piece of scrap paper. The same strange shape, a tangled spiral, crossed lines, a hook, then erased, redrawn, again. "She's done it 10 times now," said Deputy Silas Reed, standing beside O'Connell. "Won't stop, says she has to get it right." "Has the camp counselor confirmed anything?" "She was near the fire when it hit, saw the kids get up, but after the lightning strike, blackout. The rest is blank." O'Connell nodded slowly. "And this is the only child who came back with a visible injury. A burn, maybe, but shallow. Doctor said it wasn't electrical. Didn't match any known reaction to lightning." O'Connell tapped the glass. "Open the door. I want to talk to her." He entered quietly, letting the door click behind him. Marley didn't look up. Her pencil scratched faintly across the paper. "Hi, Marley. I'm Mason. I'm here to help." She stopped drawing but didn't answer. "I heard you remember some things from that night." A nod. Barely. "Can I ask what you're drawing?" She slowly turned the paper toward him. A spiral, jagged like it had been carved into something instead of drawn. A cross through the middle. Then 3 dots lined up beneath it. O'Connell froze. He'd seen this symbol before. Once, in 1979. He cleared his throat. "Marley, I know this is hard, but do you know where you saw this symbol?" She blinked. "On the log." "The fire log?" She nodded. "After the lightning. When I looked back, the big log was cracked, like it was hollow, and that was carved inside." O'Connell's stomach tightened. In 1979, a girl named Alicia Langley had vanished during a trail hike outside Livingston, 30 miles from Camp Ashwood. Her group found her diary 3 days later, wedged into a tree hollow. The final page had a rough version of that same symbol. At the time, it had been written off as doodles. But Alicia was never found. Now here it was again. "I want you to do something for me," he said, voice even. "Draw that symbol again, as close as you can." Marley did. Same spiral, same cross, 3 dots. He took the page and slipped it into a folder without a word. Later that night, O'Connell drove home in silence. He lived alone in a house with mismatched wallpaper and a back porch sagging from neglect. The file from 1979 lay on his kitchen table, dog-eared, yellowed. He pulled out Alicia Langley's drawing and laid it beside Marley's. Identical. The hairs on his arms rose. Something was wrong in these woods. Something older than any camp. Something hidden. And somehow, it had taken 7 children without a trace. Unless one of them was still alive. August 18th, 2006. Location: Camp Ashwood, Trinity County, Texas. The map didn't show the clearing. Not on the official Camp Ashwood trail guide. Not on the archival property records stored at the Trinity County Courthouse. Not even on the aerial survey the Sheriff's Department pulled from the Forestry Department database. But the dogs found it anyway. It was Kip, a 4-year-old German Shepherd on loan from Houston PD, who led the team to it. 20 minutes off trail, across 2 shallow creeks and a patch of terrain where the trees twisted strangely inward, as if growing toward something unseen. Deputy Silas Reed stopped short as they entered the clearing, heart thudding like a drum in his ears. At the center stood a totem, a structure roughly 4 feet tall, crudely lashed together from wooden stakes, broken dolls, and plastic toy parts. A melted My Little Pony head sat crookedly near the top, hair scorched. Beneath it, plastic action figures fused to a Barbie torso, all bound with brittle copper wire and twine. It was horrifying, and it had burned recently. The soil around the base was scorched black, but no ash scattered. The fire had been controlled. Ritualistic. Riad signaled to the team behind him. "Secure the area. Don't touch anything." To the east of the totem, someone had driven 7 small sticks into the earth, forming a crescent. Each was marked with a child's initial, DKMBNLT, the names of the missing. At the sheriff's office, Detective O'Connell stood at the whiteboard in the incident room, marker in hand, sketching the spiral symbol again for the task force. The girl saw it on the log. Same as the Langley case in '79, one of the state agents leaned forward. Could be coincidence. Kids draw weird stuff. O'Connell shook his head. It's not just the shape, it's the placement. Alicia Langley carved it into the tree where she hid her journal. Marley claims she saw it burned inside the split log after the lightning hit. And now, we have a clearing no one mapped, with 7 toy effigies and initials planted in a pattern, same number as the missing. "Are you saying this is occult?" asked Reed, who had just returned from the site, his boots still caked in soot. "I'm saying it's organized." O'Connell circled the symbol again, and it's not the first time. Meanwhile, in the nurse's station, Marley Greer was dreaming, but it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a memory, only twisted. She was back at the fire circle. Except the fire was gone, replaced by a black hole in the earth, yawning open where the logs should have been. The counselors were frozen, faces blurred, and 7 children stood on the edge, not scared, waiting, as if summoned. Marley couldn't speak, couldn't move. Then she heard the whisper, a voice from beneath the earth, software male, familiar. "She is the gatekeeper. Bring her back when she's ready." Marley awoke gasping, hands clutching her chest. Her fingertips were black with charcoal, but she hadn't been near the fire pit in days. Sheriff Wolf visited the clearing himself just after noon. "It's like a burial ground," he muttered, walking around the perimeter, eyes scanning the trees. "No bones," said Reed. "No blood. Just that thing." Wolf crouched near the totem. One of the copper wires had a tag on it. A child's name badge, warped from heat. Mason W. "Mason Weiler," Wolf said quietly. "Age 12. Reed knelt beside him. "What the hell is this, Sheriff?" Wolf stood slowly. Something old, something not meant for kids to find. He looked past the trees, toward the distant outline of the camp. "Get me the history of this land, all of it, before it was a camp, before it was private property. I want to know who lived here going back 100 years. That evening, as the shadows lengthened across Trinity County, Marley sat alone in the nurse's station, sketchpad open. She wasn't drawing the spiral anymore. Now she drew a map. Crude at first, paths and trees. But with every line, more details emerged. A door underground, a circle of stones, and something labeled in childish script. The room with no light. She didn't know how she knew it. She only knew it was real, and that someone else had drawn it before her. August 20th, 2006. Location: Trinity County Historical Archives. Texas Sheriff Kenneth Wolf hated archives. He hated the mothball smell, the dim lighting, the brittle feel of ancient paper. He hated the silence too, thick and muffled, like the building was holding its breath for what might be uncovered. But today, he was here willingly. Because something about that clearing didn't sit right. Something about those initials, that toy totem. It wasn't just modern horror. It was older. Rooted. He and Detective Mason O'Connell sat at a heavy oak table in the center of the Trinity County Historical Archives building, surrounded by maps, ledgers, and yellowed land deeds. "So, Camp Ashwood's land goes back to a private sale in 1961, O'Connell murmured, flipping pages in a leather-bound property ledger. Before that, it was county-owned, but not maintained. And before that, he paused, eyes narrowing at a page with faint ink smudges. Here, 1936. Parcel designated as Ashwood Reformation Home for Wayward Youth. Built on 118 acres. Staffed by the State Department of Juvenile Rehabilitation. Wolf leaned in. A juvenile home? Out here? Apparently. O'Connell traced a line with his finger. Shut down in 1943, due to internal restructuring and multiple incidents, he read aloud. That's vague. Find me details on those incidents, Wolf said. O'Connell looked up. I'll try, but records from the 1930s weren't exactly thorough, and if this place really was shut down under suspicion, it might have been buried deliberately. Wolf tapped the table. Then we dig. An hour later, Wolf discovered a black and white photograph, slipped between folded floor plans. The image was grainy, damaged by time, but one detail stood out immediately. A circle of flat white stones in the woods. At the center, a group of children in uniforms. Most were smiling, except one. A girl, half-turned, eyes wide with fear. And in the shadow behind her, something else, an adult figure. Unnamed, unsmiling, and partially blurred as if by movement. O'Connell leaned closer. This was taken at the Reformation Home? Wolf nodded. Says so on the back. Summer Assembly, Ashwood Home, July 8, 1938. That circle of stones, O'Connell said, pointing to the background. It's the same layout Marley drew, the map. It matches. Then she didn't make it up, Wolf said quietly. She remembered it, O'Connell whispered. Somehow. Back at the sheriff's office, Marley sat in a side room under supervision. She hadn't spoken much since yesterday, but her drawings kept coming. Today's page was different. Instead of a symbol or map, she'd drawn a room. Square. No windows. One door. A row of 7 small beds, drawn with eerie precision. One figure sat upright on a bed. The rest were missing. Underneath, thin, shaky handwriting, the room with no light. He lives below. Deputy Reed entered carrying a takeout bag. I brought you some grilled cheese, Marley. She didn't look up. He set the tray down beside her. You want to tell me about that drawing? Still silence. Reed sat beside her, trying not to make it feel like an interrogation. The room with no light. Is it under the camp? She blinked, slowly. It's under the trees. He swallowed. Who is he? Marley turned to look at him, and for the first time since the disappearances, her voice came out steady. He only comes when there's fire. O'Connell and Wolf drove back to the camp by late afternoon. A map of the 1938 institution now in their possession. Overlaying it with current GPS data, they discovered something chilling. The clearing with a toy totem. It was exactly where the main assembly yard of the Ashwood Reformation Home had been. And Marley's drawing of the room with no light matched the underground dormitory layout found in old blueprints. An area that had never been excavated, buried after the facility's closure. O'Connell looked up at Wolf, map trembling in his hands. There's something still down there. That night a storm rolled over Trinity County again, not unlike the one from a week ago. Lightning flickered, rain spattered windows. And in her sleep, Marley began to whisper names. Danny, Kayla, Mason, Thomas, Lucia, Brooklyn, Noah, over and over, as if summoning them. Or mourning them. August 21st, 2006. Location: beneath Camp Ashwood, Trinity County, Texas. The wind had finally died down by sunrise. Camp Ashwood sat quiet under a gray sky, dew clinging to the grass and the pine trees hanging heavy with last night's rain. A few counselors lingered in the mess hall, hushed and tired, though most of the camp had already been closed. The laughter and shouting of children were gone, replaced by static radios, police tape, and the hum of generators. Sheriff Wolf and Detective O'Connell stood at the edge of the fire circle, a wide scorched ring of dirt that had become something far more sinister. Today, they weren't there to reminisce or speculate. They were there to dig. "Mark the center," O'Connell called, as surveyors laid flags at precise distances. "Check for any signs of structural weakness. I want thermal scans, ground-penetrating radar, anything that'll show us what's underneath." Wolf crouched low, brushing his hand over the center of the fire pit. The log that Marley claimed had cracked open? Gone. Burned through, reduced to ash the day of the storm. But beneath the top layer of earth, his fingers found something smooth, hardened, concrete. He stood. "This was sealed. Old school," said O'Connell. "Poured by hand, likely from when they buried the Reformation dorms." Within the hour, a city crew brought in jackhammers and shovels. The earth gave slowly, reluctantly, as if it remembered what was buried there. Then the hammer struck metal. A sharp clang echoed through the trees. O'Connell stepped forward, crouched, and wiped away the dirt. A hatch, iron, circular, rusted almost to powder at the edges, and along the outer rim, faintly carved but unmistakable. That spiral. The same symbol Marley had drawn again and again. "Get it open," Wolf said, his voice low. They pried the hatch free. Beneath it, a ladder descended into black. The space below was not a root cellar. It was a room. Stone walls, low ceiling, no windows, and the smell, stale mold and something else, something older, like copper and rot. Flashlights pierced the dark, revealing rows of narrow iron bed frames, rusted through, lining both walls. On the floor lay children's shoes, discolored by time. One had a name tag sewn into the tongue, Kayla. O'Connell swept his light across the far wall. A door, thick, steel, bolted from the outside. "They locked it from this end," Reed whispered behind him. "Why would they lock it from this end?" "Not to keep kids in," Wolf murmured. "To keep something else out." O'Connell stepped closer to the bed nearest the door. Scrawled into the wall beside it, scratched deep into the stone with what looked like a spoon or nail. "He comes in the fire. 7 keys, 1 gate. We were the offering." He turned back, bile rising in his throat. "I want a forensics team down here now. Soil samples, prints, hair, anything." Then he paused. Something crunched beneath his boot. A crumpled paper, yellowed, nearly disintegrating. He crouched and opened it slowly. Inside was a crayon drawing. 7 children standing in a circle. Above them, something loomed. Long arms, no face, spiral carved into its chest. Back at the sheriff's office, panic was mounting. Marley Greer was gone. She'd been asleep in her bunk inside the station's side room, under supervision, under lock and key. But at 4:13 a.m., the deputy monitoring her nodded off. When he woke 20 minutes later, the bed was empty. No sign of forced entry. No broken window, no footprints. Only her sketchbook, left open on the pillow. A single page torn from it, now smeared with charcoal. A drawing of herself. Eyes open wide, standing at the edge of the same underground room discovered beneath Camp Ashwood. Beneath her feet, fire. Behind her, 7 doors, all open, and in the background faint but unmistakable. The same blurred figure from the 1938 photo. Wolf paced his office, jaw clenched. Someone had to take her. This wasn't supernatural. This was planned. O'Connell didn't speak, because he wasn't so sure anymore, because Marley had begun drawing that room before it was uncovered, because she'd known about the hatch, the fire, the symbols, known things she couldn't have known. Unless... "She's being called back," O'Connell said under his breath. "What?" He looked up. "Whatever took the other 7. It didn't take Marley that night. Maybe it wasn't ready. Maybe she wasn't. And now she is?" Wolf snapped. O'Connell stared out the window, toward the tree line, toward the camp. "I think she's the last key. August 22nd, 2006 location, Trinity County, Texas, Forest Edge. The man who found her footprints lived in a shack made from corrugated tin and rotted pine slats. He was 86 years old, stooped, and smelled like kerosene. His name was Gus Peterman, and for most of the past 40 years, he'd kept to himself in a half-acre clearing east of Camp Ashwood's boundary line. No one checked on Gus. No one ever needed to. Until now. "I seen her," Gus rasped, leaning on a cane made from a shovel handle. "The girl. The one with the scar on her arm." He pointed toward the trees behind his shed. "She came through just before sunrise, not running, not scared, walking like she knew where she was going." Sheriff Wolf frowned. "Did she say anything?" Gus nodded slowly. "She was humming, a tune I ain't heard in 60 years. Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Can you hum it back?" Gus didn't answer with his mouth. He began to hum, softly, a rhythm that rose and fell in a circular pattern, repeating, hypnotic. O'Connell froze. He'd heard it before, on the old reel-to-reel recording from the 1942 Ashwood Home Archives, the same reel that detailed incident protocols during full moons and burn bans. "That's it," O'Connell whispered. "The trigger." Back at the fire circle excavation site, a second signal emerged on the ground radar. Not far from the first hatch, about 30 yards downslope, beneath a now dry creek bed. A different chamber, lower, smaller. By noon, the sheriff's crew had uncovered the opening. Another sealed hatch, this one newer, reinforced, welded from the outside with burn marks around the seams. And this time, there was no spiral. Just numbers scratched into the iron. August 22nd, 1942. August 22nd, 1984. August 22nd, 2006. O'Connell stared. "They're spaced exactly 42 years apart." Deputy Reed shook his head. "What the hell happens every 42 years? Wolf turned, voice low. "Not what. Who?" They opened the hatch, and this one wasn't empty. The chamber was round, barely 10 feet across. The walls were lined with shelves carved directly into the stone, and each shelf held a wooden box, no two alike. 17 in total. Each box had a name burned into the lid. Alicia Langley, Vincent Roth, Cassandra Moore, each from missing children cases going back decades, cases Wolf had never seen connected, because they'd happened across counties, across eras, with gaps wide enough to feel random. But they weren't random, they were ritual. O'Connell lifted one lid carefully. Inside, wrapped in faded fabric, was a lock of hair, a set of baby teeth, and a strip of red ribbon. Sacrifice tokens. He moved to the next one. Still warm. The box's name, Marley Greer. Wolf spun around. "She's been here, recently." But the chamber was empty. No footprints, no blood. Just a faint scent of burned pine and something almost floral, like dried lavender and firewood. Then Reed called out, "Back wall, look." At the far edge of the room, a low crawl space was visible behind a loosened rock, barely 2 feet high, and scratched into the stone beside it, drawn with what looked like a fingernail. "She's below, but she's not alone." O'Connell and Wolf returned to the camp just before dusk, shoulders heavy. They'd sealed the chamber again. Too dangerous to move through the crawl space without proper support or a mapped route. But they would return. Soon. For now, they had more immediate concerns. The 1984 files had just arrived from the State Cold Case Division. Wolf sat at his desk, sifting through photocopies. Incident reports from Camp Astoria, another summer program upstate. 3 children had vanished from that camp in a thunderstorm. Same month, August. Same date, August 22nd. Only one child was ever found. He'd been discovered 6 days later, wandering a ravine, clothes soaked, eyes vacant. He never spoke again. But inside his pocket was a crayon drawing. A circle, 7 children, and a shadow behind them. The exact same drawing Marley had left behind. That night, the woods east of the camp seemed to whisper. No wind, no animals, just a pulsing quiet. And somewhere beneath the forest floor, beneath the tree roots and concrete and crawl spaces, Marley opened her eyes. She wasn't bound. She wasn't hurt. She was lying on soft earth, staring up at a ceiling made of twisted branches and smooth stone. Shapes moved around her. Quiet, careful, small. Children. "Are you ready now?" one of them whispered. Marley nodded, and from somewhere in the darkness, a voice answered, "Then the gate opens." August 23rd, 2006. Location, Camp Ashwood Command Post, Trinity County, Texas. The search had shifted from desperate to methodical. By dawn, the camp was crawling with professionals, search and rescue dogs, forensic archaeologists, media vans parked along the main road, and a team from the Texas Rangers. The old trails had been flagged, gridded, and mapped with precision. And yet, no one could find Marley. What they did find was her sketchbook, left at the base of a tree 2 miles from camp. This time, the drawings were different. Not memories, predictions. O'Connell stood under the pop-up canopy erected beside the search grid. The newest sketch lay in front of him, protected in a plastic sleeve. It showed the camp command post, drawn from a slightly elevated angle. Inside the drawing, Sheriff Wolf at the table, Reed leaning against the truck, and himself, holding this exact sketchbook, staring at this exact page. It had been drawn before any of them arrived here. "Jesus," Reed muttered. "How does she know this?" "She's not remembering," O'Connell said softly. "She's channeling it." "As it happens, you mean she's—" Reed trailed off, unsure how to say it. "Connected." Wolf had his doubts. He didn't like psychics. He didn't trust mystics or hypnotists or anyone who tried to fill in blanks with what felt right. He trusted evidence, witness statements, timelines, but the evidence wasn't helping. The timeline made no sense, and the drawings, those damn drawings, kept beating them to their own discoveries. So, when Eloise Rayner arrived that afternoon, flown in from Dallas by request of the Texas Rangers, Wolf didn't argue. She was calm, late 40s, with a voice like smoke and posture like glass. She didn't call herself a psychic. She called herself an interpreter. "I don't see the future," she told them. "I listen to where it's already echoing." She examined the spiral first, from Marley's early drawings. Old symbol, Celtic in origin, found in caves, stone circles, and grave mounds across Europe. But the one Marley draws? This variant southwestern. Rare. Apache, maybe. And it's not a spiral. She pointed to the lines again, tracing the pattern in the air. "It's a binding mark." O'Connell leaned in. "Binding what?" "Not what," Eloise said. "Whom?" Meanwhile, beneath the forest floor, Marley walked barefoot through the dark. She wasn't afraid. The others were with her: Kayla, Noah, Thomas, Brooklyn, Lucia, Mason. All pale, all quiet, but awake. She had followed the humming down the tunnel, passed through roots, bones, a crawl space that grew colder with each turn. Now they stood at the final gate. It wasn't stone or wood. It was made of flesh and ash, twisted faces pressed into the surface, eyes and mouths sealed shut. But something on the other side was waking. "You were supposed to come that night," Kayla whispered. "He called you too," Brooklyn added. Marley didn't reply. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small and worn. The toy totem. The one she'd made years ago and left by the fire circle. She'd thought it was just wood and twine. Now she understood it had always been a key. The gate began to tremble. Back at camp, O'Connell and Eloise examined the final pages of Marley's sketchbook. The last image showed 7 figures standing before a burning doorway, with Marley at the center. The same spiral drawn above them, now cracked. Eloise turned the page and froze. "What is it?" Wolf asked. She held it up. A drawing of Camp Ashwood, in flames, and above it, the date, August 24th, 2006. O'Connell stared at it. "That's tomorrow." Eloise nodded. "It burns unless we stop it." Wolf leaned in, his voice like gravel. "How do we stop it?" Eloise didn't answer right away. Instead, she placed her hand over the sketch and whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "We don't stop it." She does. August 24th, 2006. Location: beneath the forest floor, Trinity County, Texas. The fire began below. Before sunrise, Reed noticed a shimmer along the edge of the clearing, like heat rising from asphalt, only there was no sun, no heat, just the strange ripple of something wrong. At 6:14 a.m., soil sensors placed near the first hatch began recording temperature spikes, climbing steadily. By 6:37, the reading surpassed 160 degrees. By 7 o'clock, it was over 200. "Underground ignition," one of the forensic techs whispered, eyes wide. Wolf stood by the hatch, breathing shallow. O'Connell knelt beside the vented lid. Smoke curled up, not black, but gray, like incense. He pulled a matchbook from his pocket and lit one. The flame leaned toward the hatch. "It's pulling air," he said. "Something's burning down there." They radioed in a lockdown. Evacuation of all personnel within 500 yards. But it was already too late. Because Marley had reached the center. The cavern was unlike anything she had imagined. Marley stood in a circular chamber lit from above by a column of white fire. It didn't burn her. It didn't burn the others. It simply hung in the air, rotating, shifting shapes like smoke caught in a jar. The other children stood beside her, motionless. Not dead. Not alive. Held. Kayla reached out, touching Marley's hand. "You're the last," she whispered. "You stayed behind. That made you the gatekeeper." Marley's lip trembled. "I didn't know." "You weren't supposed to," said Mason. "Not until you remembered." And then the voices came. Not just one, but 7. Male and female, old and young, layered, like echoes speaking from the walls themselves. 7 bound, 7 burned, 7 risen. 1 returns to close the wound, 1 remains, the soul undone. From the fire emerged a shape. No face, no arms, just a hollow figure, formed from ash and light, pulsing with the rhythm of the spiral. The being spoke in her mind. "You held the fire back, now you must release it." Marley stepped forward. Her fingers brushed the flame, and in that instant, she remembered everything. The night they vanished, August 21st, 2006. She had seen the fire rise. She had seen the man in the black hood, not a counselor, not a camper. He had stood behind the circle whispering. He had cut his own palm and smeared the spiral into the dirt. Then one by one, the other children had gone still, eyes wide, bodies slack. But Marley had run, or tried to. The man had reached for her, and she shoved him into the fire. He burned. The circle cracked. The flame pulled back into the earth. And something ancient and starved, was left incomplete. She hadn't been spared. She'd been marked. Left unfinished. At the surface, Camp Ashwood began to tremble. Smoke poured from the hatch vents. Trees swayed though no wind blew. Animals fled from the brush in all directions. At 8:01 a.m., the grass surrounding the fire circle erupted in flame, a perfect ring, 6 feet wide, hissing as if fed from beneath. O'Connell and Wolf watched helplessly as the spiral burned itself into the earth. Then the wind stopped, and the fire froze in mid-air. A sudden, impossible stillness. Then, silence, and one by one, the children appeared. They came out of the woods, barefoot and blinking. Kayla, Thomas, Brooklyn, Lucia, Noah, Mason. Their skin was pale, their eyes clouded, but they were alive. And behind them, walking slowly, barefoot in the ash, Marley. Her hands were empty now. The sketchbook was gone. But on her forearm, in bruised skin, the spiral had turned inward, closing on itself. She collapsed before she could speak. Later, when asked where they had been, the children gave no answers. Not because they were silent, but because they simply didn't remember. The last thing any of them recalled was the thunderstorm, the fire circle, Marley standing up to tell a story. Then, nothing. Their minds had filled with other things, dreams of tunnels, of stone beds, of singing from beneath the ground. Wolf watched from the tree line, arms folded, his expression unreadable. O'Connell stood beside him, staring at Marley as medics lifted her into the ambulance. "She closed it," he said. Wolf didn't respond at first. Then, "I'm not sure it can stay closed." August 26, 2006. Location, Trinity County Medical Center, Texas. The girl had not spoken in 34 hours. Marley Greer lay in a narrow hospital bed, eyes half open, blinking slowly as nurses moved around her. Monitors beeped softly in the dim room, but her vitals were stable. It wasn't her body that troubled the doctors. It was the marks. Burn-like patterns had begun to appear on her skin overnight. Spirals, shallow as if traced with a hot wire. Her right shoulder, the backs of both thighs, one beneath the rib cage. Not random. O'Connell stood beside the bed, silent. He had seen stigmata before. Ritual branding. But this wasn't that. This wasn't done to her. It looked like it had grown from the inside out. Downstairs, Eloise Rayner waited in the hospital chapel. She sat in the second pew, facing forward, her notebook open beside her, filled with cross-references, symbols from Marley's sketches, fragments from camp folklore, and a photograph taken in 1932 of the original Ashwood home. The photograph showed a group of children in hospital gowns, standing in a circle, heads bowed. Above them, carved into the wall, was the same spiral. But it was inverted. A note scribbled in the margin read, "Binding ritual. Must be reversed. Gate resets every 42 years. Eloise traced the lines with her finger. She understood now. The cycle didn't end with Marley's return. It simply started again. At Camp Ashwood, the fire investigation turned up something buried. Not bone, not ash, concrete. 8 feet beneath the earth near the second hatch, a backhoe struck reinforced slabs, sub-basement structures far older than the camp's known footprint. The architectural style didn't match anything built after 1950. Smooth, symmetrical, institutional. Reed called it in. 3 hours later, a state records analyst faxed a document to the command trailer. Wolf read it aloud to O'Connell and Eloise. Texas State Hospital records indicate the original Ashwood home property included an underground psychiatric wing, built in 1919, used for the housing of juvenile catatonia patients and dissociative cases. Officially closed in 1943 after multiple suicides and a patient-led fire. Structure presumed demolished. But it wasn't demolished. It was buried, sealed, forgotten, and now it was open again. Marley opened her eyes at dusk. Outside, the sky glowed soft orange, a dusty Texas sunset spilling through the blinds. A nurse gasped, "She's awake!" But Marley didn't speak. She reached to her side and with trembling fingers pulled her sketchbook from beneath the pillow. It hadn't been there earlier. No one had brought it in. She opened it to a blank page, then began to draw. Down the hall, Wolf leaned against the window, talking to O'Connell in a low voice. "I've seen this before, not here, but in McAllen. In 1984, 3 kids disappeared during a summer flood. Found them 5 days later in a grain silo 20 miles away. No one knew how they got there. All they said was, 'He brought us.'" "Who's he?" O'Connell asked. "Never figured that out," Wolf muttered. "Just vanished until now." O'Connell studied Wolf's face. "You think it's the same thing?" "I think it never went away," Wolf said. "We just stopped noticing." At 10:14 p.m., Marley handed her sketchbook to the nurse on duty and pointed to the page. The drawing showed the underground hospital. 6 rooms, 1 hallway, and a circle at the very center, surrounded by a broken wall. Inside the circle, 1 small figure drawn in red. And above the figure, in black ink, a single word written in block letters, "Still here." August 27, 2006. Location, sub-basement ruins beneath Camp Ashwood, Trinity County, Texas. They broke through the slab at dawn. A tactical team from DPS, Division of Emergency Response, moved in first. Helmets, body cams, thermal readers. They descended by harness through a jagged hole cut into the earth, 8 feet wide, shored with timber and metal braces. O'Connell watched the monitors from the command trailer. What they found below wasn't burned. It was preserved. The basement structure spanned nearly 4,000 square feet. Corridors, staircases, and 6 small chambers, each no larger than a solitary confinement cell. No windows, just iron doors with vertical slots and small brass nameplates riveted to the center. Names like Leonard C. Fisher, R. number 013-No ID. Each room contained a bed, a desk bolted to the wall, and in one case, an old tape recorder, upright and clean as if it had been used yesterday. Reed knelt beside it. He hit eject. Inside was a tape labeled Experiment 9B, Lingering Identity. He held it up to the camera. "Get me something to play this on." 10 minutes later, the sound began filling the command trailer. Tape begins. A child's voice, maybe 8 years old, sings softly in the background. Unclear melody. Adult male voice. "What's your name?" Child. "No." Adult. "Do you remember where you came from?" Child. "Nowhere." Adult. "Do you know why you're here?" Child. "To keep it asleep." Adult. "What happens if it wakes?" Child. Quietly. "It starts over." Loud feedback. Adult. "Describe the dream again." Child, now whispering. "There's a circle. We all stand in it, and someone watches from the tree line." Silence. End. Tape. Eloise stared at the wall of the trailer, her hands gripping the edge of the table. She didn't need the rest of the tape. She already knew the symbols scratched into every wall of the underground cells wasn't just ceremonial. It was containment. The children were part of a ritual rotation, each generation renewing the seal. But Marley hadn't just renewed it. She had broken it. Meanwhile, inside her hospital room, Marley's hands moved faster, page after page. Her fingertips were blistered, her knuckles smudged with graphite. The drawings had shifted. They no longer showed places. They showed people. Reed, Wolf, Eloise. And in the middle of the spiral, one man with no face. Below the faceless figure, she wrote, "He isn't done." Back underground, the team reached the final corridor. Here, the air was colder, the walls damp. One chamber door stood ajar. Inside, a child-sized bed. Upturned. Scrawled on the walls, hundreds of small handprints traced in ash, and carved into the concrete floor, deep and angry. Not all came back. Reed stepped into the room. His boots scraped across the carvings. He turned on his flashlight and saw something glint in the far corner. It was a mirror, fractured but intact. As he leaned in to inspect it, his radio crackled. Marley's voice, faint but unmistakable. "Don't let him see you." Reed spun. Behind him, the mirror rippled, then cracked. And through it, he saw a flicker of his own face, but smiling, mouth sewn shut. In the hospital, Marley dropped her pencil. For the first time since returning, she spoke aloud. She looked at the nurse and said, "Someone took his place." He looks like one of you now." The nurse stepped back. Marley continued, voice flat. "He's in the building. August 28th, 2006. Location: Trinity County Medical Center, Texas. At 2:14 a.m., the hallway lights on the third floor flickered. Security cameras recorded a single figure entering Marley Greer's wing. Tall, male, wearing a county maintenance uniform. He carried no tools, did not speak to staff, and never showed his face to the cameras. When a nurse at the far end of the corridor turned her head for just a moment, the figure passed behind her, yet appeared on no adjacent camera. When reviewed, the footage skipped exactly 1 second every time he entered the frame. Not a glitch, a pattern. The system was being manipulated. Wolf stood in the security room at sunrise, arms crossed, eyes fixed to the screen. Behind him, O'Connell played the footage again on loop. "We ran every badge scan," O'Connell said. "No maintenance log, no employee by that description, no prints, no entry from the rear stairwell. He just appeared," Wolf finished. Yeah. They watched one more time. The man's posture was odd. Upright, rigid. His head moved slightly, like he was listening to something just behind his shoulder, like he wasn't alone inside himself. Wolf leaned closer to the screen and muttered, "He's not here for her." Downstairs, Marley wouldn't speak, but she drew, and when Eloise arrived with her files and news of the sub-basement discovery, Marley simply handed her the latest page. It was a portrait, not a dream sketch, not a symbol, a precise face, slicked hair, deep-set eyes, a slight cleft in the chin. The man wore a 19th century frock coat, and his mouth was sewn closed with thread. Beneath the image, Marley had written a name: Elias Greystone. Eloise froze. She had seen that name. She dug through her binder, pulling out a copy of the original charter for the Ashwood Home for Children, dated 1892. Founder, Dr. Elias Greystone, declared deceased in 1945. No grave, no obituary. Just a handwritten note in the margin of the last annual ledger. Said he went underground. Said he'd outlived the institution. Wolf gathered the 3 remaining 2006 counselors at the precinct. 2 were easy to find. Both still in Texas, both cooperative. They had clear records, valid IDs, and were accounted for during the fire. The third, Reed Holloway, was different. No birth certificate, no high school enrollment on record, no DMV file, just an application form submitted to Camp Ashwood in April 2006, listing a fake P.O. box address and a disconnected phone number. When shown his staff photo, neither of the other counselors could remember talking to him. "He was quiet," one said. "Kinda just showed up, didn't even have a car." The other added, "I don't remember him eating." Wolf circled the name on the intake form. Holloway equals Holyway. Reed. A thing that bends. He stared at it for a long time, then whispered, "He chose that name." In her hospital room, Marley began humming softly. It wasn't a melody, more like a tone, rhythmic, pulsing like breath. Eloise recorded it. When played backward, the hum produced 7 distinct notes. She pulled up the original audio from tape 9B, the child singing in the background. Same 7 notes. It was a trigger, a reactivation protocol. At 3:30 p.m., security reported a power dip on the 3rd floor. When they reviewed the hallway feed, the man in the maintenance uniform had returned, briefly, stepping out of frame near Marley's door, then vanishing again. In the corner of the camera's view, for 1 second, a word flickered onto the wall in shadow. Receive O'Connell arrived first. Drew his weapon, burst into the room. Marley sat upright in bed, eyes wide but unblinking. She pointed to the window. A symbol was burned into the glass, not etched but scorched from the outside, the spiral, closing inward. But now the center had 2 dots, 2 eyes, August 29th, 2006. Location: Camp Ashwood, Fire Circle Grounds, Trinity County, Texas. They brought Marley back just before dusk, under escort, 2 unmarked vehicles, 4 plainclothes officers. Reed and Wolf rode ahead, checking the trail to the fire circle. The sky glowed the color of bruised peaches, and the smell of char still lingered in the trees. Marley sat in the back seat, silent. She had not eaten. She had not blinked in minutes. The notebook lay in her lap, closed now. She had stopped drawing hours ago. She had drawn enough. They crossed the clearing and the cars stopped. The officers fanned out. No birdsong, no wind. Even the insects had fallen quiet. The spiral was back, burned into the earth, in fresh lines of ash. And at its center, something waited. Wolf recognized it before his mind allowed it. It looked like one of the missing children, Nico Suarez, age 11. But his limbs were too long. His joints bent wrong. His smile was fixed. Teeth small, uniform, porcelain white like they'd never touched food. He was humming. 7 notes, over and over. Marley stepped forward. The officers raised their weapons. Wolf held up a hand. No. "This isn't him," Marley said. Her voice was stronger than it had been in weeks. "It's not Nico." "Then what is it?" Eloise asked. Marley pointed to the figure and said, "It's what he left behind." Greystone had never tried to escape death. He hadn't believed in death. He believed in memory as a vessel, in memory as a body. Every 42 years he returned, through ritual, through flame, through frightened children who remembered too much and too soon. The children of Ashwood hadn't been abducted. They had been auditioned, and Marley had been the only one to return because she had refused to forget. The cycle only held power if no one remembered. Now Marley stood in the center of the spiral. The knot boy raised his hand. He held out a shape, a mirror shard. She looked into it, saw her own face, then saw her face with her eyes sewn shut, then saw nothing at all. "I don't want to be the gate," she said. The figure tilted its head. "Then unmake it," it said. "That is the last rite." She looked to Wolf. "If I do this, it doesn't come back." "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Because I won't either." Wolf stepped forward. "Marley." But she was already kneeling, notebook in hand, tearing out each page. One by one, she fed them to the fire pit. Her drawings, her memories, the maps, the faces, the spiral, and with each page burned, the air lightened. The trees exhaled, and the knot boy began to unravel. Not burn, unwind, like thread pulled from a center that no longer existed. By nightfall, the clearing was empty. No spiral, no child, no Marley. Only Wolf, standing at the edge of the ashes, clutching the final page that had not burned. A simple drawing of 7 children holding hands beneath the stars. And in the center, Marley, smiling, not alone. October 12th, 2024. Location: University of Texas Archive Building, Austin, Texas. Rain tapped gently against the windows of the 4th floor as Eloise Rayner sifted through student submissions for the new Folklore and Trauma Studies initiative. Most were ordinary. Papers on La Llorona, campfire legends, urban myths warped by decades of retelling, ghosts in swimming holes, the haunted bell tower in San Angelo. She smiled faintly. Then her assistant knocked. Something just came in. No name, no return address. She handed over a padded envelope, yellowed at the edges. Inside, a reel-to-reel audio tape. Labeled in faint pencil, Ashwood, Session 1B. Date, July 30th, 2006. Voice. Marley G. Eloise's chest tightened. She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years. Marley Greer had never been found. Declared missing, presumed dead. But Eloise knew better. She powered up the reel-to-reel, carefully threading the tape through the heads. Pressed play. Tape begins. Marley's voice, quiet but calm. If you're hearing this, the circle's opened again. There'll be signs, storms that stall above trees, kids who wake up humming a song they've never heard. You'll find 7. One will remember. One will draw. One will try to speak in a voice that isn't theirs. And one will go into the woods and not come back. But that one might not be lost. That one might be me. Soft humming begins. 7 notes. Looping. Tape ends. Eloise sat back, her skin cold. She opened her laptop, pulled up the state emergency bulletin. Trinity County. October 9th, 2024. Authorities searching for 7 children reported missing from Camp Haven Pines following a thunderstorm that knocked out communications for 14 hours. Camp was built in 2019 on land formerly occupied by the ruins of Camp Ashwood. She looked again at the envelope. Inside, at the very bottom, was a single torn scrap of paper, a child's drawing. 7 stick figures holding hands, one drawn in red, and underneath, in careful block letters, I remember.